howdy, friends. We're down at the Santa Fe Ranch in Linn, Texas, with our friend Mr. Mike East, who's welcomed us into his home today. And we're just here to talk about a little bit of South Texas ranching history and a little bit of his life down here. And I know you've all heard his name, and now you're going to learn a lot more about him. So, Mr. East or Mike, thank you for having us here today. Tell us how this all got started.
Well, let me go back to 1943 when I was born, and then, which was in October, and then my grandfather, I was a month old, I guess, and he passed away in November of 1943. And up to that time, from 1935 to 1943, my dad was running the main ranch, San Antonio Viejo. Mm-hmm. And my grandfather had some lease properties around, and actually part of the San Antonio Viejo was leased too. They didn't own all of it, just part of it, but it was the main ranch. Mm-hmm. And when my grandfather passed away, well, my uncle Robert decided he wanted to run it and run the office and everything. And my dad agreed with him. So the office kind of fell through pretty quick because I think Robert made a couple of trips to the office and then he just quit going. So my dad wound up taking that over. Mm-hmm. So the first memory I had was that there was 3 leased property that my dad took care of. It was
I don't mean to interrupt you, but your dad's Tom East, right? Okay.
Yeah, he was. It was property 26,000 acres in Zapata County that they leased from the Wardlow and family in Del Rio, mm-hmm. And then the ranch at Bruni. It was called Los Muertos. According to legend, they called it Los Muertos right where the headquarters was because some Texas Rangers had been in a gunfight and shot some bootleggers there or something.
Interesting.
And then the Buena Vista, which was, Los Muertos was 40,000 acres, and it was leased from the Bruni Leyendecker family. It had different ownership, right. But it was all in one.
Yes, sir.
Tract. And then the Buena Vista was between 1017 and let's see, 1017 and 755, kind of in between there, and it was landlocked by Jones property all the way around. You had to go through Jones's to get to it.
Okay.
So when memory I had, the only place I knew at that time was La Mota. That was the one in Zapata County, and it was all tank water there. There wasn't any groundwater. Mm-hmm. And they used that they ran steers on it. That back then when they'd grow steers out to 4 and 5 year old before they send them to market. And then there wasn't any electricity there when we lived. We had running water in the house because they had a windmill on top of the tank dam. They would pump water up into a cistern, and that was our running water. Our drinking water was rainwater there was 2-3 houses there, and they had gutters where it all went into the cisterns.
Right, interesting.
Yeah. Mm. And what I remember about that was that when it came time to deliver or ship the steers, they'd show them, they'd be 4-year-old, 5-year-old, whatever, and he'd show them in the fall of the year. He'd have buyers come down and bid on them, and they'd turn in their bids and everything, and it'd be always for a fall. No, it'd be for a spring delivery. They would winter there, and then they'd deliver them that spring. They show them in the fall.
Contract them in the fall and then deliver in the spring.
In the spring. And I used to hear that they would drive them to Hebbronville to be shipped by rail, but by the time I had any memory of it, they were hauling them with cattle trucks to the railroad pens in Hebbronville, and they would be weighed there and then loaded out on boxcars,
Right.
and stuff like that. and and after he'd get all these beds and all that, then he'd start burning pear for them and cake them. And there was 2 sets of pens there on the property, and they'd keep moving those pear grounds. Of course, they had to be around a tank where they had water and everything, because they wouldn't leave those pear grounds. They'd stay there.
Sure.
And at those pens, they had big traps there, and they just keep moving them till they wound up, and then they'd burn pear in those traps, and they'd have them all caught.
Yeah.
And
so they used the pear to catch them.
Yeah, and cake.
Right.
It was 100-pound sacks of cottonseed cake. It'd come in on boxcars.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they figured they'd cake them a pound a day per animal, and of course the pear. And he always said that for them to do any good, they had to have pear left over by the end of the day. So
it takes a little planning.
Yeah, and the first pear burners I saw, they'd put kerosene in them and use a hand pump to put pressure in there.
I've never seen or heard of one of those.
Well, that's the first one that came out, but it wasn't long before they converted those kerosene little tanks. They were about so big, and with a strap on them, you'd hang them on and they'd have a short hose like that, so you could move the handle around. And they converted them to butane. I don't know why more of them didn't blow up. I mean, just
isn't that the truth?
Yeah. And anyway, by delivery time, those cattle looked like they'd come out of the feedlot. Of course, some of the buyers that had the bids on them weren't too happy about it. About delivery.
A little heavier than they hoped.
Yeah. And then they were, of course, to pin them out of the traps into the pen, they pinned them horseback. Mm-hmm. And they'd have the Coffin Blue, Hebbronville. That trucking company had, I don't know, they had a bunch of trucks. They had maybe 14, 15 trucks, maybe more, and they just start hauling them to the railroad pens. And most of the time, my dad would be loading them at the ranch, and my uncle would be receiving them in Hebbronville, and they'd be weighing them, and then they'd be loading them out on boxcars.
Wow. So that's your first memories as a child.
Yeah.
In the cattle business.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, of course, he had those other places, but I guess I was too little to go there. And then by the time my middle sister was born, there's 4-year difference between us. He built the place that Los Muertos didn't have a house on it, just camp houses and stuff like that. So he built a house there for us, and we wound up moving there. And it didn't have electricity, but he had a big power plant put in that you had to fill up with gasoline every day. And then eventually they put electricity in there.
Yes, sir. I bet that was a good day.
Yeah. And so that ranch had 5 pastures in it. One was the one that was up to the north end that went right up to the edge of Bruni. I think all these pastures were had pretty much the same acreage in them, about 5,000 acres or 40,000. I want to give my...
That's about right. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So that was all brush, gravel hills and all brush. Mm-hmm. So that pasture, he that all the waterings had water lots around them. Of course, there was groundwater. There was windmills there. And that pasture, they'd trap them at water, and then they'd go in there horseback and take them out, but they'd drive them around in the water lot. Because, all the cows were gentle, but if you just took them out like that, the calves would run off.
Sure.
So he'd, get them broke pretty good before he took them out. And then the other pastures were more open, and they had a herd of lead steers that they would take, and they'd always put them, if there was dry lakes there and stuff, and during wet years, well, they'd fill up with water, so he had to, and they all had thickets around them. So they'd take the lead steers and put them upwind. Part of the crew would take the lead steers, and another crew, the other part would go around and get downwind from them and throw the cattle out of there into the lead steers, and that's how they'd build a herd. And you just go from one to another, and then all these pastures had a set of pens and a big trap, and they'd be throwing these cattle into that trap till they got the whole pasture gathered. Then they'd take them outside, they'd work them outside, set all the yearlings outside, and then they'd go back and work the calves.
So they had a herd of lead steers that would just go through and pick them up? And
it gave them... they'd use the lead steers like to start a herd, because it was just 4 or 5 head out there. It'd be hard to just handle them or drive them.
I see.
So it gave them something to.
Yeah. So they'd herd up.
To herd up. And then they'd use those lead steers when they'd work outside. They'd put them upwind from the herd, and they'd cut the yearling down and give the yearling something to go to.
Wow, that's neat.
Yeah, and they used those. My dad used to tell me, and the old hands used to tell me, like at San Antonio Viejo, when my dad was running it, they ran a lot of steers there too. And
at that time, probably longhorns, right?
No, they were just crossbred steers.
Okay.
Yeah, and some red steers and stuff like that. And those cattle, they would, when there was time to deliver them, they'd drive those to Hebbronville, to the shipping pens at Hebbronville. Horseback. They had to go through a lot of Jones country to get there. And my dad always told the story that, because there's San Antonio Viejo, that some of the steers belonged to my grandfather, and then there was partnership steers. It was my grandfather and Uncle Arthur. Those were partnership steers. They all had different brands on them. And then King Ranch had steers there. And I've seen my dad's diary, because he kept a diary when he was running it in 1935. McGill's had steers there too.
Wow.
But anyway, my dad tells the story. See, my grandfather and old man Bill Jones, who kind of founded the Jones Ranch, they didn't get along at all, So my dad said he had this herd of steers, and they got to this gate. They were on the way to Hebbronville with these cattle. And they got to the gate, and Mr. Jones was there in his wagon at the gate. And he said, "Say, Tom," he says, "who do these steers belong to?" And my dad said, "Mr. Jones, all these steers are King Ranch steers." So he said, Mr. Jones said, "Open the gate and let them go through." Well, it was all my grandfather's steers.
That's pretty smart.
Well, and there's one more story about Mr. Jones and my grandfather that I think I got to tell. My grandmother used to tell it. They were at the Buena Vista, and that's landlocked by Jones country. And they had to have an easement to get to it. That you go to it from 1017. And my grandmother said they were there at camp, and they had just butchered something, and the hide was hanging on the fence upside down. And of course, there wasn't refrigerators or anything like that. So all the quarters were hanging, and which when they butchered like that, they'd cook the ribs, go ahead and eat them that day, and maybe save the head and put it in a hole, cook it for breakfast the next day, and then they'd take the following day, they'd make jerky out of all the rest of it. There wasn't any other way to.
They just dried all of it. Wow.
Yeah. So they'd take, the whole crew would take a day to just spend a day making jerky. Anyway, Mr. Jones happened to show up while they're all there at camp, and all this meat's hanging. And she said he gets out of his wagon and he doesn't speak to anybody. He goes straight to the hide hanging on the fence, and he picks it up like that to look at the brand.
Check the brand.
And he drops it again. And my grandmother said my grandfather was just beside himself. And she kept saying, "Now don't say anything. Don't say anything." So then he tells the hands to one of those hindquarters to take it and throw it in the back of his wagon.
Oh.
So they took the hindquarters, threw it in the back of his wagon, and he leaves.
Did they have his brand on it?
No, it wasn't one of his. And his cattle, I think, were all Hereford anyway, so he didn't have to look at the brand. All he had to,
right,
look at that.
So I guess that quarter he took was rent for the easement, huh?
I guess so. You could look at it that way.
That's a good story.
But anyway, those steers, they drive them to Hebbronville. Then in the wintertime, what they would do, they would go in there and rope out the remnants. And they did that because when they put a fresh bunch of cattle in there, those others wouldn't spoil the new cattle. Mm-hmm. And they'd rope them, and it was all brush and everything. They'd leave them tied to a tree overnight. And then the next day they'd take the lead steers. They had a big herd of lead steers, and they'd yoke them together and just turn them loose. That lead steer would wind up at camp with them. And I have I have pictures of my dad tying one to a tree, a still picture, and then one of him doing yoking the animal, the wild animal to the.
Oh, how neat!
Yeah, because my grandmother, I guess she's the only one that took pictures, but she carried a camera in a leather case on her saddle horn, so she had to have taken those pictures. So
wow, that is neat. You still have that?
Yeah, I have it over at the house.
Oh, I'd love to see that. That's neat.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, that's a story about the use of the lead steers, which now they've kind of gotten obsolete. I don't know anybody that uses them anymore, but back then they were a necessity.
You're right, sure. That's good history.
And like the milk cows, he'd buy a Brahma bull to put on the milk cows to use those calves for lead steers, and he had the Brahma bull on them because they were able to, Brahmas could walk more, further and faster.
Right.
And
sure, cover a lot of ground.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of how, and then we got, should I jump where we got to Santa Fe? Or?
Yeah. What's your earliest memory of coming here to the Santa Fe Ranch?
Well, it was I think in 58 when we stocked it, or maybe earlier. It was in the mid 50s, but like I say, there wasn't any cattle here because when we got it, Uncle Bob had bought all the cattle off and everything.
Right.
And so we sent all those cattle we had at that Bruni country. He had 2,000 cows, and we have a pasture here. It's 40,000 acres. So he sent all those 2,000 cows and stuck them in the 40,000 acre pasture. And there was a group of about 30 head that stayed behind, and that pasture went up to the edge of Bruni that was real brushy.
Mm-hmm.
And I was with them, and with it was a whole crew there.
How old were you at that time?
Oh, I was 10 or 11, old enough to remember
Okay.
all that.
Mm-hmm.
And they found their trail. My dad and this man that helped him, kind of his foreman, he was somebody that he had met that came straight out of Mexico during the Bracero program, but he met him over at the El South branch because East Brothers had an undivided interest in the El South. And when they'd work a herd, they'd invite my dad over there to go help. And he met this man over there. And when he left there, he said he was going to try to get him because when he'd go, they'd lend him his horses. He said he sure had a good string of horses. Real good hand putting the rein on the horse and stuff like that. So anyway, he did get him, on this Bracero program. So he was with him that day, and they found their trail with these 30 head of cattle. And he said, he said, don't you think if we just trail them and trail them and trail them, they're going to hold up somewhere and they won't scatter? And he said, yeah. So he left us, everybody there except him and that man, and they started trailing these cattle in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And by 2 o'clock, they came and got us, and sure enough, these cattle had held up in an old dirt tank that had an old fence around it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really impressed with that, because since then, I've tried that, and it sure enough works. As long as you don't make them mad, just keep them.
Let them take their time and
keep them moving, keep them moving, keep them moving. They finally get to where they'll let you walk with them,
right?
Do whatever you want to.
Right. So you said that prior to that small group, they moved 2,000 head here to Santa Fe from Bruni. How did they move that 2,000 head?
They trucked them.
They trucked them all the way.
Yeah, they trucked them over here and just unloaded them.
Yeah.
And then at the Buena Vista, we stocked those that we call it Julian pasture with those cattle from Bruni. Excuse me. Then these cattle here most of the property's on the east side of the highway. This on the west side is just between the highway and the old Southern Pacific Railroad.
Okay.
Line. It's a long, narrow strip. So, yeah, at that time he was still running the Buena Vista, so he cut out 216 dry cows, and the hands from here, he had 4 hands from here drive 20 head of horses over there, and from here to the Buena Vista, there's some shipping pens that used to where they shipped from the Southern Pacific. Mm-hmm. So from there they drove them to the Buena Vista. And I think it took a day to get there with them. So he cut out those 216 dry cows, and we started out that next morning with them real early. And I remember he trotted them. He trotted those cows till about 10 o'clock, and then we just walked. And then that evening, we grazed them. You know, that's the only trail drive I've ever been on.
Right, a real trail drive.
Yeah, we grazed them, then we put them up in the lot.
And what distance was that you moved them to Buena Vista?
Well, I don't know. I think it's the horse. When they drove the horses over there, they got them over there today from Heartland Pens.
Okay.
When we drove the cows, we got here in a day and a half. We came all through Jones Country, and then crossed 755 up there where Tacowaya is. Mm-hmm. There's kind of a fork there in the road. Right there we crossed, and then we came into, it's Bass's now, but back then it belongs to Lips.
Yes.
Okay.
Probably 30 miles, maybe?
Maybe, but we got here in a day and a half with 16 cows.
That's really neat.
Yeah. And we spent the night out, you know, where we put them up in the lot. We had cots and everything, and we just spent the night there and then started with them. And by noon, we got here at Heartland with them.
Okay.
And I was in the, I was in the drag. I wasn't very old. But every gate they'd go through, him and the other man would count them.
Right.
And when we got here, he counted 215, and the other man counted 216. Of course, my dad thought his count was right, so I got chewed out for leaving that count.
For losing a count.
Well, then they did a recount, and it was 216. Yeah.
I bet he never apologized to you.
No, I didn't get any apology. He probably thought it'd do me some good anyway.
That's good. So when did you move here, and at what age did you start living here at Santa Fe?
Well, we still had the place at Bruni, because after we vacated it, he would pasture cattle there. Steers and, for different people. And then I was in grade school with the nuns there in Hebbronville, the little flower school. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, my sisters were there too. And it went up through the 8th grade. So we kind of split, where we'd stay.
Right.
Until the last one got out of school. Because we all went up to the 8th grade at Hebbronville, and then we stayed over here permanently.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I can't remember when we finally lost that lease over there, but that's what he would use it for, just pasture cattle. And I guess it was enough to keep it and pay the rent on it.
Sure. Yeah. So you moved here after you finished the 8th grade in Hebbronville. You moved here permanently.
Part-time.
Yeah.
Part-time.
Okay.
And then when we worked here, I never had, it was I asked them, well, how are we going to work this 40,000 acre pasture? And they said, well, they do big roundups in it. It had seven roundups in it. And back then, you'd have about 20 cowboys. Mm-hmm. And one of those big roundups, they have they call them volteadores on both sides. They're the circle riders. Mm-hmm. And all the roundups were always the same.
Right.
You always...
Everybody knew their job. And
it was the same roundup. Mm-hmm. And the circle riders would keep going till they met, and then they'd come to the middle, and the cattle would be... You'd make the roundup by 9 o'clock, and then drive the cattle, take the herd and drive it up close to we had it was 5 roundups on one end and 2 on the other, and there was a set of pens at each end. And the Chaparosa, which is where the pins are for the 5 roundups, had a big trap in it. And all that was there when we came. I mean, they had good pins and everything. And that big trap had several gates in it. And because you'd work the cattle outside, and say you roundup was from the south side of the trap, you'd take take all your cut, your old cows and your yearlings and everything, and go stick them in that trap. So the gate would be where it was convenient to bring those cattle and stick them in that trap, because you still had to go back and work all the little calves and, mark them and castrate them and all that. And all that you do it in one day.
That's quite an operation.
Turn them loose, and then you start over, do the next roundup. And these roundups, you always overlapped. You'd always pick up cattle from the day before that had been worked already.
Right.
And you could do it because it was, you could do those big roundups because you never lost sight on either side of you.
Right.
You could see all the way.
They couldn't slide between you because you could see each other.
Yeah. And now I don't see any way that you could do one of those big roundups, even if you had 50 cowboys, because
brush is too thick, right?
You can't see. Right. If you can't see the man next to you,
right,
you can't see the cattle going between y'all.
Yeah. I mean, this brush has changed a whole lot in your lifetime.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can look at a fences built 10 years ago where it's got big trees growing in it already.
That's right.
Yeah.
Golly.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
And the old timers used to tell me, because when this was part of King Ranch, they called this the North Norias. And it was one outfit. They had one outfit. I don't know. Do you know Lavoja Durham?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, his grandfather, his uncle is the one that would tell me, because his dad was a cowboy there, but and then he was foreman too. They'd worked the El South. The El South was part of King Ranch. That outfit had worked the El South, worked the Norias, and come over here and work this. But they'd make those great big roundups, and my grandmother would tell me that some of those roundups were so big that they'd be cutting yearlings at one end, and there'd be a crew at the backside working the baby calves.
Golly.
And
well, that had to be a couple of months to get through all the pastures, didn't it?
I don't know how they stayed out there year round.
Yeah.
They would tell me that they just stay out. If they didn't have a camp, they had tents, stuff like that. And each cowboy had a horse in his string that he could use. He could go home once a week, but he had to be back next morning.
Right.
And each one had a horse that he'd lope all the way home, and all the way back to be there the next morning for the roundups.
Wow. So they were never finished. They were.
No, it was a continual.
Yeah, there's no spring and fall roundup. It was just continuous.
And I know here, when we did all that, we'd work twice a year. And at that time, we didn't have a fence crew or anything like that, because it'd take them maybe a month and a half, 2 months at the most to work it all. And then in between, the cowboys would do whatever new fence that needed to be done, or repairs and stuff. Then they had to go back to. And the workings would be usually in the dog days of summer, because of the screw worm.
Right.
And then in the winter, they would work.
Interesting.
Twice a year. So,
man, that screw worm was sure a mess back then, wasn't it?
Well, it was. I remember when we had screw worms. I mean, it was manageable.
You had a lot of cowboys.
Yeah, a lot of cowboys and mostly baby calves, but they not all of them had screw worms.
Right.
And you'd see one, you could tell it had worms. You'd doctor it, and that usually took care of the problem. If you thought he needed redoctoring, we'd leave it tied with a short tie rope by a front foot to a mesquite tree where the cow could still come and nurse it,
Yeah.
and come back and doctor it the next day. Then that's probably all he needed.
Right.
Yeah. But on the screw worms, I tell you, when it really got bad and out of hand was in, I think they started that program in the mid-'70s, and you could, right when you could see it was beginning to work, then all of a sudden we had this outbreak. It was unprecedented. I mean, everything had screw worms.
At the tail end of it. Wow.
Yeah, in between there.
Mm-hmm.
When it started, it looked like it was working, going like it's supposed to, and all of a sudden this big outbreak. And they brought some. They asked my dad, because the plant was right down here at Mission.
Right, y'all are close.
Yeah, some of the people that worked there, they wanted to put some sheep out. They're trying to figure out what the problem was, and he let them put sheep. So I don't know, it was one or two sheep, and they had pens in different locations.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd come and water them, and they had, they had wounds on them, and they'd come collect the larvae off and all that.
Yes, sir.
And then they had me get a bunch of worms and put them in a bucket of sand. And those things I put them in that sand, and they turn kind of into cocoons, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess when they drop off, they bury in the sand, and they turn into a cocoon, and they emerge as a fly.
As a fly, right.
So anyway, with those sheep, my dad he was really aggravated, because it was just uncontrollable, and he ran into them one morning. He wasn't in a very good mood. Those guys would come and check their sheep, but he don't get the goddamn sheep off the place, and he wanted to see them or those sheep again, either one. So finally, they never said much about it, but somebody let it out that what had happened, they'd turned a bunch of hybrid unsterile flies loose.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what caused it.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And once they found out, then after that, it worked. Yeah.
I have never, ever heard that part.
Yeah. Because, if it gets like that, we're in trouble. But it wasn't like that before that happened.
So y'all are close enough to the plant where they were raising the sterile flies, and they had a bunch of them.
Well, you would send samples in, and give a location. Mm-hmm. Everybody did. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you did.
Sure.
And the whole purpose of it was so they could drop the flies where the hot spots were.
Right.
And that was the purpose of it. Now they say if they find one, they're going to quarantine you. Well, if that's the case, I'm not going to tell them I got a screw worm.
Yeah, that's
not going to help anybody or anything.
No.
Anyway, and it's going to be I won't be the only one doing that. There'll be others not going to want to say anything.
Right. Oh, of course.
Yeah, because quarantine ain't going to help anyway. If you have an animal that's sick, you doctor it. And it's not a virus that's going to infect other animals. It's just
right. And what good does a quarantine of cattle do when you have feral hogs and everything coming and going? And of course the flies, you can't quarantine them.
No, you can't quarantine flies.
It doesn't really accomplish much.
No, flies got no borders.
Right. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. And I think about that time, right after that outbreak, for whatever reason, because by that time, my dad was running the Kennedy and this too. He was running 500,000 acres of country, and they were doing it all horseback.
Mm-hmm.
And we were still able to.
Mm-hmm.
And then, for whatever reason, I don't remember what happened, but he got behind. He was able to do it all in a year's time. He'd work all that over there, and then he'd come, because he was, I was just more of a maintenance guy than anything else. He was the kind of person that you didn't do anything with a cow unless he was there. Because if he wasn't there, it wasn't going to get done like he wanted it done.
Sure.
And there's a lot of people like that, and so he got behind, and labor started getting short of labor, and these cattle started getting bigger, like the yearlings and stuff. They weren't yearlings anymore. They're 2-year-olds, some 3-year-olds.
Then they start getting wild.
Well, you couldn't handle them.
Right.
You couldn't hold them up.
Mm-hmm.
You'd go out there and you'd be sitting there. You'd catch them in the water lot, take them out, and they'd all run off when you got out the gate with them.
Mm-hmm.
So he was kind of he just, and somebody told him that they were beginning to use helicopters now. And he said, everybody has a misconception that helicopters make cattle wild, but they really don't if they know what they're doing. Those cattle are wild. Mm-hmm. By the time the helicopters get there, that's why they have to use the helicopters to start with.
Right.
But that was helicopters kind of at that time. They were just everybody was in the learning stages, I guess.
Do you remember about what year that might have been when it started using the helicopter?
And it was in the mid-'70s, 75, 76.
Okay.
And he said, well, he finally, everything we tried to do, we were defeated.
Mm-hmm.
So he says, I'm going to try them one time, and if they don't work, well, that's it. So he had Tiller out of Alice come down. They had 2 helicopters come down, and at that time, they flew to the job, and they sent a fuel truck.
Mm-hmm.
Because they have to refuel every 2 hours, and they still didn't have them where they're pulling them on a trailer and that, they're
Yes, sir.
And they had to have riders with them. The cowboy went with them, show them where to go and
right
and all that, and so they wound up penning. They penned a pretty good bunch of cattle.
Mm-hmm.
But then, after a helicopter, say they don't pin them up where there's pens, as in just some water lot. Like in the 40,000 acre pasture, there wasn't any water lots before, so we started building water lots.
Yes, sir.
And what he would do, he would pin them in these water lots. And, but how do we get them, how do we work them now? How do we get them from here to the pen? So then the idea about portable pens came up. So he bought some Powder River panels, and that was another learning curve.
Sure, yeah.
You had the panels, you could stick them in those panels, but how are you going to sort them? And they were, they had a load and chute too, a portable load and chute.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no, how do you sort them here? So we'd try to hold them up in the corner, horseback, and he'd start cutting out the bulls. And of course, but when you held them up in the corner, those bulls, a bunch of them would run at you anyway and run by you.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of them would run you. They'd run you around that water lot, and they'd spent the night in there, so it'd draw it down. They'd probably run as fast as a horse was. So then from there, I decided, well, maybe we can build some sort of cut and shoot with stop gates and cut gates in it. It's portable. Mm-hmm. So we built that in sections where you put it all together, and that worked good because at least you're able to start those Maverick bulls off and stuff like that. And we had to make it wider than normal so that the horns would fit through the.
Yes, sir.
Because they bumped their horns and they didn't want to go through the chute.
So in the water lots, you could get in there and rope the calves and brand them, vaccinate them, whatever you needed to do, but there was nothing you could do to really sort the cows and whatnot, and that's why
those bulls didn't handle. I mean, they just a lot of them were mean.
Right, sure.
I was running one time and it ran by the edge of a lake, and it slipped and fell, and then my horse saw it, and it kind of stopped, and it fell and broke my leg. And then about that time, when my horse was going down, that bull was up already. And he started coming to me, and then my horse got up, and then my horse trotted off, so then the bull followed the horse instead of me.
That was lucky.
Yeah. And it happened over at Sarita. It happened with one of the hands, except the same thing, except that bull hooked the horse. The man fell, and the horse fell with the man, and the horse got up, and when it trotted off, that bull went up there and hooked it. Mm. So
it's pretty Western.
Yeah. Yeah. And we finally got the panels where they set up where they would work, trial and error, and the chute and everything, and we'd get them pinned and just run them through there, run them through a chute. There wasn't any other way to do it.
Right.
Yeah, but it was he'd pin at all these 3 water lots. They'd come every week, and it'd been 3 water lots. These helicopters would. Mm-hmm. And they didn't get everything. I mean, there were cattle that never went in the water lots. You couldn't.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And the only thing it would take, it was time consuming.
Right.
It would take him where he used to work it once a year, all horseback. It got to where it'd take 4 years for him to make the round doing that. So we always had a lot of Maverick bulls and stuff running around.
Yeah.
But there was some period of time in there that's what was bringing a lot of money with those Maverick bulls. For whatever reason, I don't know. It was for hamburger meat or something. They were bringing more money than anything.
Interesting. Yeah, by the time an old bull gets 2 or 3 years old and has never been worked, they get unworkable.
No, they just want to get away.
Right.
And what good does it do to rope one if there's 30 of them run off or 40 of them run off?
Right. So it was the helicopter that got it manageable, where you could work them in a short period. The helicopter and the portable pins.
Yeah. They handle those kind of cattle, and they probably even if he hadn't let all that time go by and didn't have those Maverick cattle, he's probably like those places that you could work horseback, where you'd work a lot of country in a short period of time. And probably because of the brush, you couldn't do it that way anymore, and you were going to wind up getting behind anyway. Maybe you could do it, but it's going to take longer.
Sure.
And you're going to wind up getting behind.
So take me through a little bit of history of how your family wound up with the Santa Fe Ranch, starting back with the King Ranch and how you all wound up here. What's the history behind that?
After my grandfather passed away, my grandmother had a fifth interest in the King Ranch because there was 5 kids, so she had a fifth interest. But they wanted out. Her and my dad, my uncle, and my aunt, they wanted out because they wanted to be more involved in the operation, and they weren't able to. And so they were the first ones, I think, that got out, and they had to kind of fight to get out, and they had used Mr. Floyd. He'd been Jake Floyd from Alice. He was my grandfather's lawyer from way back there. He's kind of the one that led the charge. And they went back and forth, and they finally they decided that but they wanted land instead of money, so they decided that they'd go ahead and give them their part. And they had already lost to San Antonio Viejo, the King Ranch, because my grandfather had borrowed money and worked on borrowed money, and then he hit hard times, so he lost it. But his mother-in-law still let him run cattle on it. She would lease it to him, let him run cattle on it. But as far as ownership, he'd lost ownership to it.
Okay.
So they finally come to an agreement that they would get out. What hadn't been decided yet was what part would they get. Of course, San Antonio Viejo would get that back, but there was more than that. So the King family, this was at one time part of the King Ranch, and when Captain King passed away and they settled the King estate, which was a lot of these water trawls have 1935 on them, written in the concrete, and it says King Ranch was running W. And then 1938, there's some trawls that says 1938, and they have the HK brand on it, which stands for Henrietta King. So that's the year that the estate was settled.
Oh.
And she decided to leave this to the son, the Santa Fe.
Okay.
And in the El South, that was part of the King Ranch, she left it to the Atwood family, and they were related too. She was a daughter, or I'm not sure what the connection is, but she was an heir too. But she lived in New York, so they got the El South Ranch.
Yes, sir.
And then the rest of it, Alice got it, the daughter, who married Robert Clayburgh.
Right.
And Alice was my grandmother's mother.
Okay.
So anyway, when they were going to decide who got what, about that time, the King family decided they really didn't want to be in the cattle business anymore. So the King Ranch bought this from the King family, and to give to the east, give them the Santa Fe and the San Antonio Viejo for their interest in the King Ranch.
So correct me if I'm wrong. They already had the San Antonio Viejo, but it wasn't enough acreage to equal 1/5 of the King Ranch.
Right.
So they acquired this ranch, the Santa Fe, to add to the San Antonio Viejo, and that got it to 1/5
Yeah,
of the land.
yeah. Well, it was agreeable,
Right.
except this was vacant. Uncle Bob kept all the cattle on it.
Right.
He bought it with cattle and everything, but then he left the horses, the remove them, but he kept the cattle.
So circling back to where we started a while ago, that's when your dad started moving cattle from Los Muertos and La Mota and all that to stock this ranch.
Well, not really La Mota because that was all steer. They ran all steers there.
Okay.
But
They brought all the
They
cows
moved the
here.
Los Muertos cattle over here and the Buena Vista cattle. And then Robert moved some from San Antonio Viejo over here.
Okay. All right.
And then where my dad used to run Buena Vista, he turned that over to Robert because he was closer anyway.
And that was leased country.
That was lease country, but my dad wound up buying it later.
Okay.
Yeah. And San Antonio Viejo, a lot of it was lease country too. It was just adjoined, and it was in tracts, different owners. And my dad bought it up through the years. It's like I went to St. Edward's High School. It was run by the Holy Cross Brothers. And the reason I was sent there was because they owned what we call the Casa Verde tract at San Antonio Viejo. Miss Fremont had left them that. I think it was 10 or 11,000 acres. And those brothers, two of them would come down once a year and to make an inspection, but really they'd come down to hunt.
Right.
So one year, Brother Raymond, he was the president there. I think he's still alive. He's in his 90s, but he was president because St. Edward's was a college and high school. Since then, high school's been closed, but at that time it was a high school and college. And Brother Raymond, was president of the whole thing. And he came down, and there's a story, the blog on it. And he came down on one of these visits, and they had decided they wanted to go co-ed. And they were asking for a donation. And when Brother Raymond came, his talk, he says, I went down there, and he said, Tom was pretty quiet, and that was my dad. He never said much, except that he was happy with the education he was getting at St. Edward's, with my education I was getting at St. Edward's, that kind of stuff. But he said when the word donation came up, well, he broke his silence. and my dad told him, did I say why they wanted the donation? Yeah, they wanted to go co-ed and build a girls' dormitory.
Oh, they need the donation to build the dorm. Okay.
Yeah, because they want to go co-ed. The college did, not the high school, just the college.
Right.
So Tom said, go talk to Mr. Floyd. He'll advise us on what to do. So they bought that was the deal. They bought the property from St. Ed's, and they gave them money and called it donation.
Oh.
So they could build the
Yeah. That was a good business move.
Yeah, so that's how he acquired that. But anyway, they called it the East Hall for years.
Yes, sir.
And I don't know, just recently, just not too long ago, they decided they were going to rename it because everybody thought that it was the East Hall because it was on the east side of campus.
Oh.
So they had a presentation there, and they had me go up and take a picture. And I had a picture of my grandmother and grandfather where they're horseback in front of an old wooden windmill. And I took that picture up there, and he gave a talk and everything. That's where he gave all the details about how the whole transaction was done. And they renamed it, I believe it's Alice K. Eastall or something like that.
That's interesting. No, I don't have a donation, but I would like that ranch over there.
Yeah, it had a big, I don't know if it's fallen down already or not because I don't go there, but it had a big 2-story house there.
Okay.
And in the book, where they say that the goat herder, that kept a herd of goats there.
Yes, sir. Uh-huh.
And the goat herder committed suicide. Well, that's where that took place. The Casa Verde.
Casa Verde. So who owns that tract today?
East Foundation.
It's with the foundation.
Yeah, they have San Antonio Viejo. They have the Draper place, which we call the Ranchito.
Mm-hmm.
Gachupin. The Gachupin is just a section. The Ranchito. Well, there's another tidbit there. They drive the cattle from San Antonio Viejo to Hebbronville, and my grandfather bought a section called the Gachupin in between, and then he bought Ranchito, which goes right up to, and that's 5,000 acres. So when they drive the cattle, they'd overnight them at the Gachupin, and then the next day they'd go get all the way to the Ranchito, 5,000 acres, and let them fill up or wait for the train or whatever there. And then from there, they'd take them right straight to the pens and vote them out. But he had that. That's why he had those two particular.
He had it laid out perfectly.
Yeah. So anyway, they have those three. They have the Buena Vista, and they have the El South. But the El South is 26,000. That's our undivided third, or the East Brothers had an undivided third. And when that got divided up, they were trying to decide who got what tract of land, and part of that El South is in black land, but it was all brush. Mm-hmm. And then part of it goes right up to the water. And they were trying to decide who got what. And Uncle Robert wanted the black land, and my dad argued with him that they needed to keep the part that went up to the water, right, because it goes right up to Fort Mansfield, because he said that's going to be worth a lot of money someday. Mm-hmm. And his idea was that if there was ever an estate tax liability, part of that could be sold for development and use that money to pay the estate taxes. That was his thinking on it.
Okay.
So anyway, my dad prevailed, and they got the part up to the water. So the East Foundation has the El South, the Buena Vista, San Antonio Viejo, Gachupin, the Ranchito, and Santa Rosa, which Santa Rosa, Robert and Lisa bought later after my dad passed away. They bought that with their own money. It wasn't part of the original East Brothers. And they bought the Linn, which was part of the San Pablo that was, Aunt Sarita bought 40,000 acres called the San Pablo to run her steers on. And her steers would go to Hebbronville too. And then when she passed away, she left half of the San Pablo to the Turcottes, and then the south end to the Littons. They were blood related to her. So, and the Litton part joined San Antonio Viejo on their north end. So it was two brothers. It was Arthur and Lee Litton. When Arthur passed away, Robert and Lisa bought Arthur's part, And then Lee passed away, then they bought that part. So that's 20,000 acres.
Wow. A lot of land being traded.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think you wound up in a pretty good spot.
Huh?
I think you wound up in a pretty good spot here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can say I won't say I was raised here because I was already, well, I wasn't grown. I wasn't grown either, but I was 12.
Right. How long have you lived here full time now?
Oh, full time since I got out I graduated from St. Edward's, and because I didn't go to college. I graduated from high school in 62, so I've been here full time.
Okay. So this has been home for you since 62.
But in 62, we still had that Bruni country, because I remember my dad had ran some steers there from here, and we shipped them from Hebbronville shipped them by rail, but we trucked them to the shipping pens in Hebbronville.
In Hebbronville,
Yeah.
right. So what are your, as a younger man, what are some of your favorite memories of Uncle Robert?
Well, I guess he was
Because you lost your father when you were fairly young, right?
I was 40.
You were 40. Okay.
Yeah. He passed away in 84. I was 40.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so at that time, did you kind of spend more time with Robert, or?
Well, I'd spend in the summers. I'd go out there.
Okay.
Not all summer, but I'd spend a month or two, and I'd help him work. Go with him horseback, and I mean, Robert was a great cowboy. I mean, he could rope, ride a bucking horse, and all that. But he was very disorganized.
Right. He just wanted to be a cowboy. That's all he wanted to do.
I mean, one time we were going to work, and they catch this armadillo, and he decides he wants to take him to a tank and see if he'll swim or not. And then another time, they all ride up to a tank, and they decide they're going to swim their horses. And my grandmother and my aunt were there. And my aunt wanted her horse to swim, but she didn't want to go in because she's wearing a white shirt, and she didn't, so she told one of the cowboys to swim her horse for her. And I don't know, he got in there, and somehow the water got in that horse's ears, and they're just throwing the fit in there, and the water, it went down. But that man was a good swimmer, he kept, and it was pawing and kicking, and I didn't know if either one of them was going to get out of there alive.
Wow.
But he saved that mare.
Wow.
Yeah. But he was, that was Robert. But and sometimes he could rope a foot, horseback. I mean, he was
Just an all-around cowboy.
yeah. And a pretty roper.
Really?
Make a big old loop, And he rodeoed, but he never missed. But his horses, he kept his horses too fat all the time.
I always heard and read about him that he probably loved his horses too much.
Yeah.
He was all about his horses.
And he lent me his horses, and they were good horses.
I bet.
Yeah, they were good horses. Like when we got to Santa Fe, he'd come every time we'd work. Him and my grandmother and my aunt, they'd stay at the guest house there. That's the only original building that's left, is that when you come across Cattle Guard, that's white.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's where they stayed. And he'd bring his horses in the cattle truck. He'd bring about 30 head of horses. And we'd be working a herd. He'd spend his whole time changing horses. He'd ride one for a little bit and then go get him another one.
So do any of his horses I know. I think you have a grandson today that's big into cutting. Did any of Robert's horses ever kind of get into those big bloodlines of cutting horses, or he just was roping horses mostly?
Well, they had when I was young, they used to have a lot of horse buyers come down. Both him and my dad. They had Ranchero. Ranchero was Razor Rancho's sire.
Okay.
And then they had a horse called Brown Tino that their driver, Rosendo, he lived in Kingsville. And he was my grandfather's driver, but he was a driver and a cook and, wherever my grandmother and aunt wanted to go, San Antonio or wherever, and wherever they stayed, well, they'd get Rosendo a room. Mm-hmm. And Rosendo would keep them informed. He said, they have a stallion over there and they're going to cut him. He said, y'all need to get him. So they got him. He called Brown Tino, and that was a good horse. And I don't know if Cletus Holland, do you know the name Cletus?
No, I don't.
Well, he was a big horse trader from up north somewhere. Him and Robert Sutherland, all those people would come down and buy horses from him. And then they got, but then they didn't, they started keeping their same horses.
Right.
And I'm going to say that by the time my dad passed away, he didn't have the quality of horses that he had before, just because they didn't bring any new.
Oh, I see.
They're keeping their own studs.
Right.
And
kind of not inbred, but they weren't there was no hybrid vigor. They weren't bringing.
No, they were just
blood.
the same horses, and they got to, they were still good ranch horses, but not the horses that they had before.
Right.
And Mr. Wardlow, the old man that they did business with that owned that spot country, mm-hmm. gave my dad a dun horse. And every colt out of that horse, no matter what color mare, the colt would be done. And they were all, none of those horses ever bucked when you put a saddle on them out of that dun horse. And they were good cow horses, and they all pulled a rope.
Interesting.
Really good.
Yeah, that should have been the big sire there, huh?
Yeah. But my dad used to also say that my grandfather's idea was if he saw these horses were getting too bred up, he'd get some Spanish blood and put back in them to keep the toughness and stamina in them.
That makes sense.
I'd go over there with Robert. It was fun. He took me to, even though he was against hunting and all that, of course, him and my dad, my aunt, hunted a lot when they were young, but then later on they didn't want any hunting. They didn't,
right?
Unless it was they'd take a doctor,
sure,
or a lawyer or somebody like that, or a dentist
on a limited basis, wherever they wanted to. Sure,
but they themselves didn't hunt, and Robert, he was very protective of all wildlife,
mm-hmm.
But he took me to kill my first deer. Robert did. He gave me my first rifle. Took me to, and got the first deer. And my dad, I told him one time I wanted to go hunting. We lived out there at Bruni. So I thought we're just going to drive around and look, No, we drive off a ways and we get out and we walk. And walk and we walk and we walk, and then we rattle the horns, mm-hmm. and then this goes on all day. And if I make any noise, I'm scolded.
Right.
Or step on a stick, or my pants are rubbing together when I'm walking. I'm scolded. This goes on for a whole week. It was all day, no food, just a lot of walking. And I said, I don't think I really want to hunt that bad. They had two mountain lions in the cage, a male and a female that they had trapped out there. There was a lot of lions out there, and they had a trapper there. And
Which ranch was this?
at San Antonio Viejo.
Oh, okay.
And every evening, my grandmother and aunt Rosendo, that was a chauffeur, he was the one that when they captured my grandmother, they made him drive them to Hebbronville because they were going to rob the bank. That was Rosendo.
Really?
Yeah, he's the one that used to tell me the story that he talked them out of it halfway to Hebbronville that there was a lot of Texas Rangers, that it wasn't a good idea to go rob that bank. So he came back, and of course they let my grandmother, they didn't harm her, but they had her kind of
He must have done some fast talking.
Yeah. But anyway, they had this, we're going back to the jackrabbits. There was this place called the Moraya. It's kind of, I don't know, 7 or 8 miles from the headquarters. And they had this big water lot, it was all open out there. And they had this Willis Jeep, and it had a spotlight. And it had a spare tire mounted on the back. My grandmother would sit up there on the back with a shotgun, and my aunt be in the front with her shotgun. And of course, I'd be in the back, just as a passenger, and they'd shoot these jackrabbits for the lions.
Right.
And then we'd get there, and Robert would say, "Poor little jackrabbits, poor little jackrabbits." My grandmother said, "Now don't start that crap." But she would work you to death too. I mean, there wasn't any. She decided they had this blacktop road from the highway up to the ranch house. The brush was getting too close to it, so her and my aunt and myself, we were gonna clean that road out with axes. So
Wow,
yeah,
that's a day's work.
yeah, and those that old Tiburcio. There's a picture of him in one of the Dolby books riding a gray horse. I don't know if that picture's been around everywhere.
I think I've seen it, yeah.
Yeah. He worked for George Clegg, who was breeder in Alice when he was young.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandmother always said that even though Uncle Bob got credit for buying those sorrel for the King Ranch, it was actually my grandfather that found those sorrel for the King Ranch. Because he used to go, and that's where he run into Tiburcio, and from there Tiburcio went to work with my grandfather.
Okay.
And we have pictures of him there in the house. He had a big mustache, and he's got the 3 kids, Robert and Lisa, and my dad. He'd take them hunting with dogs and stuff like that. And one time, he had the old hands would tell me the story that he had Robert with him, and took him hunting. And my grandfather had bought this prize Brahma bull, and they were sitting out there in the brush, and they heard this noise. And Robert asked Tiburcio, he said, "What was that?" He said, "I think whatever it is, he's got claws. You need to shoot it." He shot it with that Brahma bull, but he hit him in the hump. They said that Robert started crying. And Tiburcio would tell him, "No llores, gringuito. Yo para la pinta por usted." Do I need to translate that?
Yes. Do it for the camera, yeah.
Yeah, when Robert started crying, Tiburcio told him, "Don't cry, little gringo. I'll go to the pen for you in your place. So don't cry. Don't worry about it." And everybody, by the time I knew Tiburcio, he was already kind of semi. they didn't have him with a cow crew anymore. He was kind of when they'd get a certain age, they'd put them somewhere. Kind of they called them rancheros, where they just ride the fences and waters and look for worms or whatever, stuff like that.
Right.
So by the time I knew Tiburcio, that was what he was doing. But they said he was a really, really good cowboy. And then my grandfather really, really liked him and made him cow boss. But Tiburcio was contrary. The hands told me that none of them told me the story, but the old hands that had been there, that knew, that worked there, said that they'd all be sitting at camp, and Tiburcio would get up, go get on his horse, and start riding off, and they'd all not say anything. So they'd all get on their horses and follow him, and they said he'd ride away, then he'd stop, and he'd look at them and say, "Where are y'all going?" "Well, we're just seeing what you're going to go do." He said, "I really don't need anybody to go to the bathroom." So he had to be, they couldn't, my grandfather had to demote him as cow boss because they said nobody wanted to work for Tiburcio anymore. So the one that was his cow boss was one of Letty's great uncles and her grandfather. They were the cow bosses there for my grandfather. And anyway, when Tiburcio got moved, they sent him over there to the Moraya, and it was 7 or 8 miles. Tiburcio didn't drive, so it was all horseback. And I was there with my grandmother and aunt when they'd do it. I don't think Tiburcio had a family or anything, but he always talked about this girlfriend he had in Alice. So they would write letters during the day, and they'd put perfume on them and all that. And during the day, Tiburcio would be gone, so they'd go in the house, and they'd leave these letters on the table. Well, Tiburcio would come in. He couldn't read, so he'd ride all the way back to the headquarters to read those, have somebody read those letters.
Get somebody to read them for him. 7 or 8 miles to go get one way.
Yeah. And from there, they moved him to the yard. Yeah. And, take care of the yard stuff. And I'd be there. And my grandmother would fill up a cup of bourbon. And she'd tell me she'd take this out to Tiburcio. So I'd take it out there to him.
Wow.
Yeah.
A lot of history with him.
Yeah. But, no, Robert never scolded me or anything. He'd just tell me, he'd say, just don't get hurt. He says, because they won't let you come anymore if you get hurt. So, okay.
He was the fun uncle. Gave you some rope.
Yeah. And then, him and my dad had friction, just like all brothers and sisters and stuff. And my dad was the one that was organized. He was the one with a business mind and all that. And I think he's the one that kind of, after my grandfather passed away, and he owed lots of money, and there was a lot of debt and stuff. My dad kind of helped save it and put it all together, and it was it wound up the East Brothers partnership, which they formed that partnership right after my grandfather passed away. It's a third, and a third. And I think my grandmother was part of it, but then they bought her out for tax purposes, and there was only 3 of them. And Robert started wanting to partition. And they had the 300,000 acres. Well, if it partitioned, my aunt was always, she lived, they weren't married, so both lived with their mother.
Mm-hmm.
So, they were going to get 2/3 of it. That and my dad always argued against any partition. He'd say, Robert, there's not many of these big ranches left, so I'm not going to be a party to cut one of them up. So we said, rather than do that, he says, I'll just go somewhere else and just leave it all. And that tactic worked. I mean, they didn't want that.
Right.
So that worked till my dad passed away.
Right.
And I kind of got when my dad got to Kennedy to run, Robert wanted to come over here and work at Santa Fe. And my dad didn't want him to. Mm-hmm. And he'd say, you have enough to do over there. I want to go over there and I want to work at Santa Fe. Well, no, Robert, and they said, well, Michael, help me. So I was kind of put on the spot.
You got caught in the middle, didn't you?
Yeah. And, I certainly wasn't going to go against my dad because,
No, sir.
To start with, he held all the cards anyway.
Right.
Yeah. And I knew how Robert worked. It was if he got over 100 cows in the pen or whatever, he'd just be overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
Even though he was a good cowboy, things like that couldn't. He
just had a different kind of mind than your dad.
Yeah, he couldn't. He couldn't put his arms around it.
Right. It's not uncommon,
And he'd do stuff, and everybody knew it. Everybody that did business with Robert knew it, and they adjusted for it. He'd buy a load of hay, and he was a set price already, and he'd have them unloaded, all these little different shacks and stuff. Mm-hmm. And then after it was all unloaded, he'd tell them, that's too much money. And they say, well, that's not the deal, Rob. Rob say, well, if you don't like it, just load it back
up. Go pick it up.
Yeah. So, but they people that dealt with him already knew that, so they knew. They knew what to do.
Sure.
They probably overpriced it or something. They wound up paying what they wanted. He wound up paying what they wanted anyway.
Right.
And he did that with cedar post, it delivered and then unloaded.
Yeah.
And that's what happened when my grandfather passed away, that he took San Antonio Viejo over. My grandfather would give all the hands from Christmas to New Year's off, paid. Mm-hmm. They could have it all. Well, when my grandfather passed away, Robert said, well, y'all can still have the days, but I'm not paying you for them. So a lot of them got up and left.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, because it was, all of a sudden.
That used to be their little Christmas bonus kind of.
Yeah, he passed away in November, and in December, Robert, they felt like that was part of their salary.
Mm-hmm, sure.
So, but that was Robert, and then he'd sell. There was a fellow by the name of Woody Copeland from Malney, Texas, and he was a big cattle buyer. He'd buy a lot of cattle for Hal Smith, and they'd buy them out in the pasture. And he'd come down there and buy cattle, and of course, Woody wanted to cull them,
Mm-hmm.
and he would, I don't want this one, don't want that one. Well, Robert would put them aside, and then when you gave him a new bunch, you put those culls back in with the other bunch. But Woody knew he was doing it.
Right. That's funny. He didn't have the element of surprise.
And Daddy always, he'd tell me, if you tell a man you're going to do something, you got to do it. You can't. That was his. He says, don't, you can't do this one.
Right. Don't learn from Uncle Robert.
Yeah, don't do that.
That's good.
Yeah. But then, when my dad, he passed away all of a sudden on December the 8th of 1984. He was working cattle over there and he just had a heart attack. And they called me, and I went on over there, and then they took him to the funeral home. The next morning, I go to the funeral home, and Robert shows up, and he tells me, "Well, I'm the boss now."
Oh, God.
And I says, "Okay." And he says, "I don't want, you're not going to work any cattle." He had no say-so on the lease country. My dad had just made that lease in 82, but he wasn't a part of it. And that was a bone of contention too, but my dad didn't make him a part of it because he was going to have to borrow a lot of money, and he didn't need any interference.
Sure.
Like, Robert could really...
He needed to have control.
Yeah, Robert could really interfere if he wanted to.
Right.
Yeah. So, I got my marching orders there that I don't work any cattle in Santa Fe at all. So, okay.
Oh, so he had, prior to his death, your dad had told you don't come work cattle at Santa Fe with Robert, right?
No. When my dad was alive and he started running to Kennedy, Robert wanted to come over here and work the cattle here at the Santa Fe.
But he couldn't do it without you.
Well, he could do it without me, but he wanted me, he would ask me to help him.
Right.
And my dad didn't want me to involved in it.
Right.
And so he'd tell Robert, he said, "Well, I don't think Mike will work for you." And I'd be just standing right there,
Oops.
But anyway, we had that there at the funeral home, and then after, it was, Christmas was coming up, and everybody had to be paid. Everybody got Christmas bonuses at Christmas. And our office was still in Hebbronville. There was the East Brothers office. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't sign checks because my name wasn't on the signature card. Only Robert, my aunt, and only the three partners' name was on the signature card. Mm-hmm. So I had all these checks, and I had to come pay these people. So I take the checks out to the ranch for Robert to sign, and he just looked at them, and he went through the whole stack of checks, and he said, "I don't pay my people this much." And I said, "Well, I don't know, Robert, but it said we give them bonuses. That's why it's, it's a double check."
Yeah.
And he acted like he wasn't going to sign them. And I finally told him, I said, "Robert," I said, "my check's in there, but if you don't want to sign it, that's fine. But I said, we got to pay these people." So he signed them, and we got that out of the way, and then but he didn't let up. The firm that represented the partnership was Jake Floyd's firm in Alice. Of course, Jake, he'd long passed away, but it was Kenneth Oden and Buster Adamy, and it was a pretty good sized firm. And so he wants, it was midnight, and we have to go up there and talk about this because he wants to Christmas hadn't even passed, and he wanted to get this partition done. Well, the thing was to make up.
Well, Robert wanted you to go to Alice.
The meeting with the lawyers, so we get this partition done.
Right.
And so I go up there, and I knew that the firm couldn't represent either him nor I because they represented the partnership. But I took the lawyer that my dad, I took him or asked him to go because I didn't know what all was going to take place. Morris Atlas from McAllen, he's the one that represented my dad in red in the brucellosis fight.
Okay.
So he went. Well, Robert took my grandmother and my aunt with, and we all get there, and he's adamant that he wants to partition, and he wants the Julian pasture. See, because they had 2/3, and there was 300,000 acres. 30,000 acres had to come off of Santa Fe somewhere
Right.
to make up their 2/3. And he wanted the Julian. The Julian was 40,000, and that's where all the improvements were at that time. That's where the families lived that worked here, and the two big sets of pens.
Yeah.
They're both in that, but that's what he wanted, and we weren't getting anywhere. And Morris started he was real smooth, He said, it's almost Christmas. He said, let's just let this go till after the holidays, and then we'll talk about it again. So that everybody went home. But he took my grandmother and my aunt there. I don't know what for. I guess
Little support.
she was old. My grandmother, she didn't even, probably by that time, she didn't even know what was going on there because everybody walked out of the room there one time and just her and I sitting in there. And I said, oh, Mama, that's what I called her. Oh, Mama, I said, I'm really sorry about what's going on. And she looked at me and said, what's going on? I said, okay.
Not bad.
Yeah. So we tabled it with a stipulation that I was not to work any cattle at Santa Fe. And we were in a drought, and Santa Fe didn't have any money in the account. My dad didn't have any because he spent most of his money with that, trying to get that Kennedy deal put
Right.
together through the years, with all this and that and the other. And so he had probably spent most of his money. There wasn't any money, but Robert and Lisa both had money because they never spent any of theirs. And Robert even offered to pay our estate taxes, and I wouldn't do it because I knew that would be a mistake. There'd be strings attached to it. So by that time, the accountant that East Brothers used, she was a lady from Corpus. She found Robert a lawyer, Hayden Head from Corpus. I don't know if you know of him. Okay, so he was representing Robert, and Morris was representing me. And I started work on the Kennedy, and got a bunch of cattle shipped and stuff. Where my dad used to pen in all these water lots, I asked the guys, I said, we have to get money coming in because, the bank wants money and it's all
the cash flow things.
Yeah. So I said, can we make bigger roundups? And they said, no. And I said, well, what if we get an extra helicopter? And they said, yeah. So I really didn't know the country over there, but the hands were raised there. A lot of the ones that were there, and they knew how they made those big roundups. So we got the extra helicopter, and we made big roundups with that extra helicopter. And the first one we made, we shipped, and there was lots and lots of cattle there because there was a lot of Mavericks and stuff. So we made about 3 roundups there in about 3 weeks, and shipped about 30 head 30 loads of cattle, single deck.
So what you're calling a big roundup, how many head do you think would be in a roundup? Just
That'd be 2,000 cows.
each roundup.
Yeah, that we'd turn back out.
Wow.
And we'd get them rounded up and run through the chute. And there weren't any details, And I told them, I said, we don't want little bunches. I said, we need to get big bunches. And within 3 weeks, I think that generated about almost $1 million for the bank, for the loan.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then I decided, well, I'll slip over there to Santa Fe and make a big roundup, and Robert won't even know about it. So I come over here, and I make 2 roundups. The second roundup, the banker in Alice calls Robert and said, Robert, you have $600,000 in the checking account.
From the cattle that you were selling. Yeah.
There's $600,000 just sitting here. Do you want to put it on interest? Well, and I had already talked to AJ Lindsay in San Antonio where we sent our cattle. I said, AJ, I got to send some cattle from Santa Fe. Will you not say anything? Well, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
So we got. Of course, that let the cat out of the bag.
Sure.
And so Robert calls Hayden. And Hayden tells Robert, he said, don't sign their checks anymore.
That was
even though there was $600,000 in the bank, I couldn't touch it because we couldn't pay the light bill.
Oh my gosh.
So I had to come to the table.
Mm-hmm.
And Morris said, Morris had already told me, he said, we're going to have problems, or you're going to have problems. I said, why, Morris? He said, because your name's not on the signature card. It's only their name, so you don't have access to any money.
Morris was the banker.
No, Morris was a lawyer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I didn't give you the banker's name.
Yeah.
I'd rather not.
Yep, I understand.
But, he just did what he was supposed to.
Of course, it was his job.
Yeah. We were going to meet at Hayden's office. Hayden Head's office in Corpus. And on the way, I stopped in Kingsville. That's where Exxon had their office. And Morris had already told me, he says, you need to be thinking about what you're willing to give up instead of Julian. So I stopped in the Exxon office there in Kingsville, and Pat Ketchum was there, and he's still alive. He was head of Exxon in Kingsville. Mm-hmm. He's in his 90s already. And I said, Pat, y'all have all these maps. Figure out for me where 30,000 acres is on the south side of the Santa Fe. Well, that was a whole mullah.
Right.
The mullah's two bigger pastures and one little pasture. That's the whole mullah tract. But there wasn't any improvements there. Just windmills, but no pens, no structures, no housing, nothing like that, no power. So we get there, and I had seen my dad's will where it said in his will that if for whatever reason we couldn't get along and work things out, he wanted us to have the option to sell. But it had to be, whatever we sold had to be undivided, and we had to offer it
to the other
family members first. So when I get there, and Hayden had already, and during the pre-negotiations, Hayden had already written Morris a letter that the Santa Fe was worth more money Then the San Antonio Viejo, the surface was worth more money than the San Antonio Viejo was because it was better country. See, he was already positioning himself.
Sure, of course.
So we get there, and he didn't even put a price on it. And we get there, and I tell him, I said, why don't I just sell first? And Robert got excited. He said, well, how much you want for it?
The number Hayden had put in that letter, right?
Well, Hayden jumped right back at Robert, and he told Robert, he said, Robert, if you're going to negotiate this, you don't need me. So, hey, he put him.
You shut it down pretty quick.
Yeah, he shut it down pretty quick. And then, of course, then Hayden asked the same question. How much do you want for it? And he said, well, about $80 million for mine, undivided.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, that's too much money. And I said, well, you've already priced it.
Robert didn't even know about the letter. Probably.
I don't know if he knew about it or not. Probably not. And Hayden said, well, why don't you divide it? Give Robert his part, and then you can sell the rest of it. And I said, no, I'm going to, if it goes undivided. And I said, if he don't want it, Clinton Mangus was blowing and going at the time. I said, I know Clinton Mangus may want it.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody wants Clinton Mangus in any of their stuff.
They've been a rough partner.
Yeah. So they get up and walk out of the room, Robert and Hayden do. And Morris kind of chuckled and he said, well, at least they're thinking about it. So when they came back, I said, well, maybe why don't y'all just take the south end? And Pat had already given me he drew a quick map there, and he drew the line where the 30,000 acres was and where 35 was, which was a little further up.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, why don't y'all take this and I'll keep the rest of it? And Hayden said, well, it doesn't look like enough. I said, well, that's what they told me.
It's mapped out by Exxon.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if it was 30, if the moolah turned out, it might have turned out to be 35,000 instead of 30. But anyway, we came to an agreement. And then I got to keep the 600,000 that I had already sold.
Right.
Yeah. So Robert, he can't wait to work this new property. So there's nothing there, Right. No, my grandmother's, she was in her 90s already. The chicken coop's still there. He moved his chicken coop made out of sucker rod and put a tarp on the north side of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where they were sleeping because he wanted, he just got this and he wanted to work it. Yeah. And he put an outhouse there.
Was there a fence there between Mulas and the rest of Santa Fe?
It was a separate pasture.
Okay.
The Julian's 40,000 acres, but then the Moolah is, it was already, it's fenced.
Right.
The fence runs all the way from the highway all the way to the perimeter fence on the east side.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, it was right at 30,000 acres, and it's two pastures.
Okay.
And one of the pastures has, you go into it from the highway, which is where he built the structures, because there wasn't anything, but he wanted to work it. So to work it, he had to, they always, wherever they worked, they stayed.
Sure.
And wherever he worked, my grandmother and aunt went with him. So that was their living quarters and anyway, about a week after I find out they're there, and so I'll go over there, and I told him we were going to change the locks on the gates, but I wanted them to have the key now, and whenever I changed the lock, I'd give them the new key. And I mean, they were all really happy that I was there, Even Robert.
That's great.
Like nothing had ever happened.
Just got past it all.
Yeah, it just once he got what he wanted, that's it.
I bet that made you happy. I bet you felt good after that.
Yeah, and then then I'd go help him where and
Right.
he'd ask me if he could use he built him a couple of sets of pins, Robert style. He uses binding twine and baling wire and an old tube in to repair a leak in a pipe.
Right.
And that's Robert's.
Yeah, it's just the way he operated.
Yeah. And so he'd ask me if he could use the pins there at Cantinas because the Mula joins are at Cantinas. I said, yeah, sure, Robert, anytime you want to use them, they're there. You're welcome to them.
Mm-hmm.
And everything was good until my aunt passed away. She had cancer, and
Remind me what your aunt's name was.
Lisa,
Lisa. Yes.
Lica, Lisa. She knew her days were numbered, and she's the one that, she took care of my grandmother when my grandmother wasn't able to anymore. My grandmother wouldn't allow any nurses or anything. And then when my aunt got sick, well, they had to, Robert had to get somebody to, because Aunt Lisa couldn't do it anymore. But when she knew she was sick, she called everybody over there, and I couldn't go that day. So I went a different day, and she was telling us how, about their childhood and this and that and the other and all that. And then she said, this is what, she said, we can't, I guess Lisa was really smart. And not that Robert wasn't, but some things he had trouble grasping. They had already been told that estate taxes were going to be a problem because there wasn't enough money to pay them.
Sure.
So she said, well, I want to do something like, we want to do something like Anna Linda did. Well, what Anna Linda did, she wrote in her will there would never be any hunting on her property. But she wanted my father or I to lease it and run cattle on it for as long as we wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they wanted to do. And gift us as much as they could. And she named she said the Mula, the Buena Vista, the Linn, and Santa Rosa. We want y'all to have that. And the rest of it, we just don't want any hunting, but we want y'all to be able to lease it and run cattle on it. And we want some money to go to charity for cancer research. That were her exact words. And that's what she told me when I went. And then she was showing me stuff that they had in their china cabinet there, from the 1800s. Had dates on it and everything, explaining everything to me. And then one night, Robert called me that Lisa was really sick. He was going to take her to the hospital in Rio Grande City. And I said, okay, well, I'm on my way over there. So on my way over there, the sheriff from Stark County is calling me that they're having a lot of trouble with Robert because Lisa had passed away and he wanted to take her home. So I get there, and sure enough, he's adamant that he wants to put her in the car and take her home. And I said, Robert, we can't do that. And we talked about it, and finally he said, well, he remembered, he said, we need to call Marty West. Well, Marty West lived in Kingsville. His father was Otis West, who used to run the Clayburg Bank. And I guess Lisa had confided in him making all the arrangements.
Wow.
And Robert said, Marty will know what to do. So Marty came down, and sure enough, he said she wanted my grandfather, who was buried in Kingsville, reinterred at San Antonio Viejo, where she was going to be. She'd picked a spot there on the ranch. And so he had all that already. So we left her there, and they, you know, they're at the graveside services. Robert basically, because I never really talked business with him, you know, or asked him anything, he kind of told me the same thing that Aunt Lisa had told me, except he said, I want you to have the Mula and the Buena Vista. And he designated who was going to get what. And I said, and the Santa Rosa goes to Lisa, that's my younger sister, and the Linn goes to Alice. Well, by that time, Hayden Head had passed away. So, or he got killed in a plane crash. So Paul Pearson took his place. And Paul Pearson was a devious little, he wasn't Hayden Head, you know, or I don't think he had Hayden Head's integrity. I think Paul Pearson was after Paul Pearson. He started preparing documents for Robert, and he took one. Robert was working cattle at Old South, and he got to Lisa first, and she signed it. And then when he took it to Robert, Robert didn't want to sign it. He got mad because they were tracking him down out in the pasture. So Lisa drew her name, a line through her name. She said she wasn't going to sign it either, and they fired Pearson. So he hired Buster Adamy, who used to be the, you know, he was a firm that used to represent the partnership.
Partnership, yeah.
So Buster gets hired, and Buster's there at the funeral. You know, by that time Buster had already been hired, and I told you know, Buster was always been a good friend of mine. I told Buster, I said, Buster, you know, this is what Robert told me. I said, I don't care what Robert does. I said, but he's giving me, you know, he said he's going to leave me twice as much as he's leaving my sisters. And I don't want it that way. I said, whatever Robert decides to give us, I want it a third, you know, evenly. Mm-hmm. And that was it, you know. And so Robert, they tell him that, because he's still talking about same stuff that they wanted to do. Mm-hmm. He goes to Buster's office, and he tells Buster, you know, these properties go here and the rest of it and this and that and the other. And then Buster tells Robert, says, Robert, you know, he says, that's fine if you want to do it that way, but if they can't pay the taxes on it, they're going to have to sell part of it. He says there's a better way. And he explains to him, he says, if you disclaim Lisa's part, 90,000 acres of Lisa's part, which is what that acreage amounted to if you added it up. It was in different tracts, but it was a total of 90,000 acres. Is if you disclaim her part to them, he said, you'll have to pay taxes on it, but then when you pass away, they'll get it tax-free. And the rest of it we'll do it like, you know, do the cancer research and this and that and the other. And he says, and but, control was a big issue with Robert. So they brought some lawyers from Dallas and got all this done. And they made limit. I guess they call it a limited partnership where we would be the limited owners of this 90,000 acres and Robert would be the general partner. In other words, that would give him control. We had no say-so.
Right, sure.
Until he passed away. And so he agreed to it. And I was working cattle over there at Sarita. I didn't know any of this was going on. And Buster called me. He said, Robert's decided to do this. He says, he signed it, your sister signed it. He said, you need to sign it because, there's a window where it has to be done. And then, we get past that date, it's not going to happen. So I said, well, I'm still over here at Sarita. He said, well, why don't we meet there at the overpass? Where that highway from Benavides goes to.
Yeah, at 281, 2285. Wait,
Yeah,
I think it's 2285. Anyway.
yeah. Well, so I don't know. It was late at night already, and we met there under the overpass, and he had his secretary with him, Laura, and so I signed everything I needed to sign, and Buster explained it to me, and how it all, and that Robert was happy with it, and he said you need to thank Robert for this. Okay, so I do that. So I call him and the next day and thank him, and everything's fine and dandy. And then Buster told my sister to open a small checking account in Hebbronville, in the Hebbronville Bank, under this new partnership's name. Just put $1,000 in it and get a signature card, because when you do a disclaimer, the IRS, you're screwing them out of some potential income.
Sure.
So it's
a tax deferral. It's got to be legitimate. Sure.
Yeah. So this was just to make it all look legitimate and real.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first deal that happened. We got that signature card done. Mm-hmm. And the bookkeeper sees it, the old bookkeeper, and she calls Robert, and she said, did you approve this? Well, of course, Robert didn't know anything about it. What? Well, she drives it out there, shows it to him, and all he can see is that there's 3 signatures on there already, and he's won. He says, whoa. She said, that's 3-1. So that kind of started it.
Mm-hmm.
And so then he wants this explained again and again and again. And the more they try to explain it to him. And then, so Buster and the CPA make a trip out there to Robert to explain to him. And at CPA, she's deceased now, but she was kind of a coyote herself. Too, she loved to set up foundations and put herself in charge of them before she'd get something out of it.
Yeah, had a little history.
So she was,
doing that.
This was just prime for her to, and she knew exactly what Robert's buttons were.
Mm-hmm.
So they both went out there, and then Buster had to leave, and she stayed. Buster had to go catch a plane somewhere, and she stayed. Well, after that meeting with her, we had to that's it. We got to put everything back like it was.
Oh, that's when Robert.
That's when, it started right there. He said, we have to, Buster frauded me. He tricked me into this. He took my ranches. You just don't give ranches away like that. We got to put it back like it was. Well, that created a problem because it had already been filed in the courthouse.
Yeah, sure.
And it's 90,000 acres. So we're gifting him 90,000 acres back. So who's going to pay that we figured the liability of that, the gift tax on that was going to be $9 million. You know, so we got a big problem on our hands.
Yeah.
So Buster gets fired, and he rehires Pearson.
He's back.
Yeah. And of course, that's right up Pearson's alley. That's exactly what he wanted.
Sure.
And I had 2 meetings with Pearson and Robert at Santa Rosa. And first, Pearson said, well, that Robert understood the disclaimer, but he didn't understand the amount. That he didn't know it was going to be that much property, that he didn't understand the amount. And I said, well, yeah. I said, but how? That still doesn't get us around this estate tax.
Still have
he was trying to figure where it wouldn't be as much estate tax because we wouldn't be giving so much back. That's what he. So that was it at that meeting. So then they want to have another meeting, and by that time Pearson had changed. Either Robert had changed his mind or Pearson had. All of that was off the table. The whole thing had to be undone. And I said, well, how are you going to do that? He said, well, we'll have a friendly lawsuit. And I said, there's no friendly lawsuits. How can you have a friendly lawsuit? A friendly lawsuit like Robert didn't know what he was doing when he signed this. Somebody tricked him.
He wanted to get y'all to let him out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, he and I would meet and we'd talk about it, and I'd try to explain it to him. And by the time I'd get through, he said, we got to put everything back like it was. That was it. Mm-hmm. And then he started telling everybody everywhere, that we had stolen his ranch from him. and we just kept talking and talking and talking, and then my ex-wife gets involved in it.
That always helps things.
Yeah. And, before that, she had nothing to do with Robert. Then all of a sudden, she's making trips to Port Mansfield. And I come in from work, and I see her saddled in the back of the car. And she's all painted up, all dressed up. And I didn't know where in the hell she was or what she was doing. So she was taking one of the hands with her. So I asked that hand one day, I said, well, where y'all going every day? He says, I'm not supposed to tell you, but we're going over there and helping your Uncle Robert work cattle. I said, well, she never helped me working cattle. And then she comes in, and I think she figured out I knew something about it, or she tells me that she's going to help me because Robert had told her he wanted her to be a trustee of all of his property. And then she was going to turn around and lease it back to me. And I said, it doesn't work that way. I said, it's not going to work that way because there'd be a conflict. You can't lease it back to me even if you wanted to. And I said, you have no business going over there. Anyway, it's between him and I.
Sure. You
have no business over there. Yeah. If it had been my dad and she'd have tried that, he'd have told her, this is between him and I. You stay out of it. But see, once she got involved, that complicated everything.
Right. Oh.
Then I got mad, and I didn't want to. I quit talking to Robert. All that part was over with.
Yeah.
And so then we wind up in what we call the disclaimer lawsuit.
Right. Just goes on and on and on.
Yeah. And it took, after all that was over with, it took 2 or 3 years, and to Robert and I, I finally thought, well, really, I don't blame him because he has a weakness for women, for one thing, and another is he really doesn't understand a lot of these things.
And then he had a lot of people in his ears that were pulling him different directions.
So, then we got together, and everything was fine till and then I find out that in the meantime, Pearson passes away, and then his partner takes his place, and then all this, when we settled, that disclaimer lawsuit was in 95. The settlement was that Robert gets back this property in return, because there had to be some kind of exchange to get around it.
The disclaimer.
The disclaimer.
Right.
And in exchange, Robert had all the executive rights on the Santa Fe, which meant we couldn't entertain any leases or anything because
He had the power to
Robert,
negotiate.
Robert had those. That was because he had 2/3 of
I see.
of
Yeah.
the minerals. Mm-hmm. The minerals were never divided, so he was that was part of the exchange, that we get the executive rights on Santa Fe, where we can go out and make new leases and stuff like that.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. Oil and gas leases. And I don't know, there was something else. And then he had to put so much money in escrow for a certain number of years in case the IRS came back, and
Right.
yeah. And we had to agree to not ever contest any of his appointees that he appointed, or anything he'd will or anything like that. We had to agree to that.
Right.
So all that was done, and then that was kind of it till we, then what happened then.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So Robert passed away in 2006? 2007.
Yeah, and after he and I settled our differences, I'd go out there every Christmas, because he's by himself, except for the help there. Well, let me just, another good story, and back up just a little,
Sure.
if you want to.
Absolutely.
After my aunt passed away, he had the hands looking after my grandmother, and Buster was still his lawyer. So one of these guys tells me one day, he says, Robert has me having to bathe your grandmother and everything. He says, I'm really uncomfortable with it. By that time, she was bedridden. And he said, I went to him, and he said, well, if I'd keep doing it, he'd give me a raise. And he said, he raised me $50. He says, I don't care what he raises me. I just don't want to do that anymore.
Right.
So I called Buster about it, Buster Adamy. So he said, he says, I think there's a way she can have all the help she wants, and from a home health agency, and it won't cost him a dime. So we got that going. Mm-hmm. And then one of the guy's sisters also helped. One of the guys that worked in the kitchen, she helped. And it happened that an immigration officer, or not the immigration officer, but immigration had caught a group, and there was one lady, and they were holding her as a witness against because they were being smuggled.
Sure.
And they were holding her as a witness. So they called my mother and told her that they had this lady there, and they were just holding her so she could be a witness in the case. But instead of her being in jail, she could, take her and let her work in the meantime.
Right.
So my mother says, okay. So then she tells me about it. And she says, I think the lady that was taking care of my grandmother, her name was Lydia. I tell you whose sister she was. That guy was a slicker that was out there.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, he worked in the kitchen. It was his sister. Anyway, she said I think she'd be good to help Lydia with old mama out there. So, we get her out of jail, take her over there, and all that. In a week or so, I'm up there at the barn. My mother comes up there, and I know she's pissed. And she said, "You know that lady I sent over there?" I said, "Yeah, what about her?" She said, "You know that Robert's sleeping with her?" I laughed. And so I called Buster about it, and he said, "Yeah." He said, "Your mother already called me about her." And he says, "And I told your mother," I said, "it's none of her business or my business or anybody's business who Robert chooses to sleep with."
Right. Not much you can do about it.
And he says, and I laughed, and she hung up on me. So then they went back and forth. My mother had Border Patrol go pick her up, and Robert had some lawyer get her back.
Oh, no.
And this went on. I mean, this went back and forth several times till I think this woman ran into the car or Robert's car or something, and Robert wound up firing her. But that's what finally took care of it. But the way my mother found out about it, because Lydia called my mother, and she said, "That woman is over here giving me orders. She thinks she's the woman of the house now."
Yeah.
That's how that come to pass.
That's a great story.
I'd go out there on his birthday, Thanksgiving, Christmas, I'd go.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2006, Thanksgiving of 2006, I was gonna go out there for Thanksgiving, and I couldn't get, the landline was off. Somebody taking the phone off the line, so I called somebody, and they gave me the cook's cell phone number that worked there in the house to cook for Robert, and to call him. So I called him, and he asked me, he says, "Well, does Oscar know?" And I said, "No." I said, Why should I have to tell Oscar after before? I just want to let Robert know that I'm going to be there on Thanksgiving. He said, "Well, the girl know." I said, "What girl?" "Well, she used to be Robert's girlfriend. Now she was Oscar's girlfriend." And I said, "I don't know." I said, I don't even know who she is. But I said, "I'll be there Thanksgiving." So in an hour or so, I get this phone call from Oscar, and he starts telling me that Robert don't want me to come out there on Thanksgiving. And I said, "Well, Oscar, if Robert doesn't want me to come, he's going to have to tell me himself because I'm going to be there Thanksgiving." And so I show up, and Robert's not there. Oscar had taken him off somewhere. At that time, I didn't know. I had no clue anything was going on, and I even trusted Oscar because he was raised there.
Mm-hmm.
He left later on when he got out of high school or something and went to work for the USDA as a tick rider over on River, but then he started coming back on weekends helping Robert. He was a good cowboy.
Yeah.
I mean, he's deceased now. And Robert loved him.
Yeah. Treat him like family, I'm sure.
Yeah, he knew his parents worked there, his grandparents worked there. It's an old family that had been there for years.
Mm-hmm.
So, Oscar taking him off, so I wait there, and they show up, and Robert, as soon as I saw him, he acted like he didn't know if he was coming or going, and we sat down at the table to eat, and Oscar leaves, so I'm there with Robert, and I kind of suspect that he dosed him with something or other, because he was just, or maybe he was already beginning get that way, but I never had seen him like that before.
Right.
And I asked him, I said, Robert, I said, do you need anything? He says, I don't have any money. And, I knew that's when those big gas wells checks started coming in, and Robert was getting most of it because he had 2/3 of it, but he was getting over $1 million a month in royalties.
Yeah.
But I took $100 bill out of my pocket and I handed it to him. He just grinned, stuck it in his pocket. And we get through eating, and he says, let's go back there to Mama's room and watch television. My grandmother already, she passed away in 97. This was 2006. And the house was built before air conditioning, so it's got a west wing and an east wing like that where it gets breezes from both sides.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to walk through one bedroom
To get to the next.
to get to the next.
Yeah.
So here's Robert's bedroom, then his bathroom, and my grandmother's room, and Aunt Lisa's room. And we get to gonna go into my grandmother's room, and he starts knocking on the door. He says, Mama, you have a visitor. And he said it twice, and I said, Robert, she's not there anymore. He says, well, where is she? And I said, well, I think she's in heaven. Oh, okay. So we get there, and we sit down, and then he starts crying. And he starts telling me, he says, these people just treat me like I'm crazy. And I have no clue what he's talking about.
Right.
And I just told him, I said, well, Robert, just don't pay any attention to them. I said, if they tell you you're crazy, they're the ones that are crazy. Don't pay any attention to them. And we sat there and visited, and I'd get up and I'd walk outside to go use the bathroom, and there wasn't any air conditioning, so just a screen door. Mm-hmm. You'd walk on outside in the yard, and he'd say, "Don't leave." And I said, "Well, I'm not leaving. I'll be right back." I'd come back, sit with him, and I stayed there with him till he fell asleep, and then I come on home. I never thought any more about it, but 2 weeks earlier is when he signed the last documents he ever signed. And that's what he was talking about.
Mm.
And I don't know if they've seen the signatures.
Yeah.
Some of them were just blobs of ink.
Yeah.
And the lady that notarized all those papers was Paul Price's, he called her his assistant. And now she's the chief executive officer for the East Foundation. She still works there.
Wow.
She works there as she went from a notary. She financially, if you go to the East Foundation staff, her name is Veronica Paredes, but at that time it's Veronica Lao, L-O-A, Loa, something like that. That was her maiden name, Loa. And since then she got married. But if you look at the notary, it's Veronica Loa on the...
Interesting. Mm.
Yeah. And that's where they get all their power from.
Yeah.
From those signatures.
Right. How have you moved forward from there? I mean, do you have it compartmentalized in your life now where you can just move on and
no,
no, it's hard to get past that, right?
Well, what bothers me, not so much my grandfather. I mean, I didn't know him. I knew of him. He liked to spend. He liked the good things, but he worked.
Mm-hmm.
And he traveled. He knew everybody, He knew there was a book in there about the 4-6s that was in the house, an old book, and somebody said something about his name is mentioned in there about the 4-6s. One of the foremen or owners or something that Tom East always said that he'd take a calf for a rain any day or any time of year.
Yeah, that's neat.
Yeah. But he liked, a fancy ring. Mm-hmm. He always wore a coat and tie. And he'd buy expensive hats like the show for Rosendo. Mm-hmm. He always wore good hats because he said as soon as my grandfather put a little wear in them, he'd give him the Rosendo and get himself a new one. But my grandmother and my aunt and Robert and my dad, they were all very, very frugal, especially, Robert more so than anybody, but my grandmother too. I'd drive her there on the ranch. When I spend summers there, we'd be driving around and she wanted to talk to one of the hands and I'd stop. And she'd say, cut the car off, you're wasting gasoline. She was just going to tell him something, but she wanted that. She didn't want me wasting gasoline.
Yeah. Yeah, just very frugal.
Yeah.
So all those years they saved money and
if Robert went somewhere, they'd pack him a lunch because he wouldn't buy lunch in town. Mm-hmm. And one of his big tricks was if he went somewhere to another ranch, he'd say, when Ed Durham passed away at Norris, that's Lavolger's daddy, we were both there at the funeral, and Helenita's there, she's Robert's cousin.
Right.
And he says, the funeral's over with and everything, and Robert says, Helenita, he says, I don't think I have enough gasoline to get home on it. But he did this all the time. And Helenita told him, he said, Robert, she says, there's been a lot of changes around here lately. And, they even locked the gas pumps and they didn't give me a key. So one of my men were there. So I told him, I said, follow Robert to Sarita and fill his car up there at Sarita. Sarita's just down the road from Norris.
Right.
I said, just fill his car up there.
Sure.
At the ranch.
Make sure he gets home.
Yeah. But he did that everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He knew everybody had a gas tank at the ranch.
Yeah. Hey, that's just the guys, the hands would catch rattlesnakes to sell, and he told them that he wanted to have some money because those were his rattlesnakes. But, then they get this under the means that they did.
Yeah, the foundation, you mean?
Yeah. They don't admit it. They call it a generous gift from Robert. Or they used to. Mm-hmm. They don't do it much anymore because I've hammered them so much on it. Because it wasn't a generous gift.
Yeah.
But on their website, you still see generous gift. And we're keeping up the East family legacy. Well, the East family doesn't need people, strangers, keeping up their legacy.
Right.
And they still argue. When the CEO, the writer, interviewed him for the book, he kept arguing that my grandfather, if Robert hadn't have done it, one of them would have done it because they were always in favor of a foundation. And see, they're trying to say that if Robert hadn't have done it, it had gotten done one way or another because that's what they wanted.
Yeah. So,
and he used a letter of condolence. He says, I have it. It's in my archives. And the writers told him, well, let me go through your archives. But he never would let him go through the archives. Mm. He says, prove, I want proof that I want you to be right, but I want you to prove it to me. And then he shows him this letter. The Kyle Field at A&M was named after a professor, somebody was named Kyle. Mm-hmm. And when my grandfather, and the reason Neil has that letter is because when Buster Adam, he passed away, his secretary asked us if we wanted stuff. There was stuff in there back when Jake Floyd, my grandfather, were.
Sure.
And he gave all that to me.
Little mementos, yeah.
Yeah, all that stuff was there, and that letter was in that. And it's a letter of condolences to the three siblings from Mr. Kyle. I don't know what his first name was, on the loss of their father, but nowhere does it. But he claims that because of that letter, my grandfather would have done the foundation, and they've even posted on their social media page.
Right.
I've seen it on there,
God.
that letter, and it's a letter of condolences. But anyway, when I got that stuff, when Neil first came in, I thought, here's going to be a change. And I asked him, I sat down with him and I highlighted stuff where in November 16th, Paul Price puts a clause in there that the lawyer preparing this will always have a job. And I highlighted that, and I highlighted in Robert's deposition, and this is when he was mad in the disclaimer lawsuit, in his deposition where he says he wants us to lease it and run cattle on it, and he wants money for cancer research. And several things like that I highlighted for Neil. And I gave him I asked him for three things. I said, you fire Paul Price, because what he did was wrong. And anybody else that had anything to do with Roberts, the game warden, I said he was in on it. The bookkeeper in Hebbronville, she was in on it. She knew about it. All those people that enabled this, what happened to Robert, I said, you fire them. You give money for cancer research, and you stop your narrative about this generous gift. He never said he would or he wouldn't. He just didn't say anything. And he didn't do any one of those three things.
Golly.
But anyway, I still got along with him for a while, so I decided, well, what are we going to do with all this stuff? So we gave it to him. He came down with a U-Haul, and we loaded him up. So that's how come he's got that letter of condolences. Because everything that Buster did to Robert, which was right up Buster and Jake Floyd and all those lawyers from my grandfather's time, right up to when Robert fired Buster over the disclaimer, was in that office.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing they had was from Hayden Head, when Hayden had whatever he did, and Pearson and Price. That's all they had. But the rest of it, the older stuff, they don't have.
Right.
They do now because I gave it to them.
Right.
Yeah. But
so to not to oversimplify, but the whole discussion about putting his holdings into a trust or a foundation began with the notion that the heirs wouldn't be able to pay the inheritance tax.
That's right.
And so flash forward, 15 years, there's plenty of money in the estate to cover the estate
taxes. And I brought that up to, because, and it's in the book, in the buyout, when they bought Oscar out and all his powers, they bought him out. They bought him out with Robert's money. Mm-hmm. Robert was bedridden. Oscar Osuna had to sign his own checks to use that money because he was the only one that had Robert's power of attorney, plus he had his medical power of attorney. Him and Price had Robert's medical power of attorney. They're the only ones that could make decisions for him medically. And they appointed, we had a mediation over that because we were suing them for legal guardianship because we couldn't even get in the gate to see how Robert was. So that's why we filed that lawsuit to get in.
Right.
And Yuri, my lawyer, talked me into making a deal with Price, and I didn't want to. But it was taking too long. The judge he wouldn't rule on anything. And they asked him at the second hearing at San Diego to at least let an independent doctor go in and check this man. Mm-hmm. And the judge would not rule on that. And then Canales, who was the other lawyer that was helping Yuri from Corpus, told the judge, please expedite the next hearing because we're running out of time, Judge. Well, he put it another week later. We'd already been to 2 hearings over a 2-week period, and we're going into another week. So that's when Yuri convinces me, well, let's cut a deal with Price.
Yeah.
So Price, by this time, he was looking for an off-ramp, because Canales had him on the witness stand asking him all these questions, and the judge sealed all that shit. But when we started writing the book, the writer told Canales that they didn't want to release the stuff to him, and Canales told the writer, he said, just give him some money. So we gave him some money, and he got all the stuff. The whole court transcript.
Right.
So that was Yuri's argument, and I couldn't argue with him because I did want to, it was bugging me that I didn't know how he was.
Sure.
So I said, all right, well, we went into mediation, but behind everybody else's back. Mm-hmm. See, Helenita had her lawyers there. Tress Clayberg had his lawyers there. We were all wanting the same access to Robert. That's what we wanted. Mm-hmm. And Yuri convinced me of it, so we were going to mediation, but nobody else knows about it except Price, myself, Yuri, and Carlos Martinez, and Oscar's group. So by midnight, we make an agreement. They do the deal, and Price appoints himself as trustee, and then he appoints Carlos as another trustee, and then Ron Davidson, they bring him in too, so they appoint themselves as trustees. So then I meet with them they're at the ranch at San Antonio Viejo, and I say, I said, first of all, I said, I'm responsible for y'all being here. If it wasn't for me, y'all wouldn't be here. And all I want is, I want more transparency. Robert was still alive, but he, just hanging on. Mm-hmm. I'd like for you to bring on another board member or two. And then I pointed out the fact. I said, you know that the whole reason this was done is because of the estate taxes, but y'all also know that wasn't an issue anymore.
Yeah.
But somehow or other, it didn't get brought up to the client. And there's nothing I can do about it.
Sure.
But I want y'all to know that I'm aware of that.
Right. Because I guess Robert passed away with like a $800 million estate. Is that right? Something in that ballpark?
He had, I don't know what the land would be worth. He had 200, because we got when we settled the disclaimer, we would get the moolah.
Right.
I knew there was something I left out.
Yeah.
We would get the moolah because that was part of his 200,000 acres.
Right.
But see, him and Lisa had bought individually. He had bought the Santa Rosa and the Linn, so that's probably 50,000 maybe that they had
added to San Antonio Viejo.
So anyway, they wind up with 217,000 after we take out the moolah, including stuff that Robert and Lisa had bought individually. Mm-hmm. And cash, I'm estimating they had about 200 million cash in the bank.
Wow.
Yeah.
Didn't even know it.
No.
At some level,
He never. No, it didn't mean nothing to him.
Yeah.
The only thing he would spend money on, if a ranch became available for sale, he never looked back. He'd buy it.
Sure.
and which just drove. My dad didn't want him doing that because of estate tax
Right.
purposes.
Right.
And then the accountant didn't want him doing it because she knew there'd be less money for her.
It's too bad we can't all do like Dolph Briscoe. I can't remember the details, but I think he passed in 2011, and it was the 1 year when there were no inheritance taxes. Period. There was just a 1 or 2 year window in there where he passed away and there were no inheritance taxes. I thought people have always joked and they said, knowing Dolph, he planned it that way.
I don't understand. They have all these agricultural associations and they all have lobbyists.
Mm-hmm.
And all they talk about helping the ranchers and farmers and doing this and doing that. The biggest culprit that the demise of ranchers and farmers is estate taxes. Mm-hmm. And they never mention it. Never mention it.
Yep, you never hear about it.
And, I'm not a solar farm fan at all. But, like us, we have enough cash probably that they can pay our estate taxes. Mm-hmm. These guys. But then that's it.
Right.
That's it. So, we were working on a deal. I didn't want to do it, but it fell through. A solar farm, 5,000-acre solar farm. And they say, well, that puts the country out of, you can't farm it or ranch it with a solar farm on it. Well, but if it generates the cash, it keeps the heir from having to sell it.
Right.
And whoever buys it isn't going to raise cows. They're going to buy for recreation or for development.
Yeah.
They're not going to buy it to raise food on. Because the people that can afford to buy it are not in that business.
It's a hunting ranch.
Yeah, it's a recreational stuff farm.
You bet.
But and that's the only reason we were going to, it fell through, but that's the only reason we were going to do it. So they would be able to take care of their heirs.
Right.
Yeah,
well,
because like I said, we have enough that that can be fixed, but they're going to have to start making money.
Sure, exactly. Yeah.
If they want to keep up their lifestyle that they're used to.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. And why don't these associations, they never talk about that?
I know you would think ag production would get you some kind of a benefit when it's being passed to another family member, to the next generation, even a deferred tax payment, but if any tax at all, but it's just not happening. Nobody's fighting for it.
Well, when my dad passed away, they had appraised this at $200 an acre, and we didn't have the money because all that big gas fine, it didn't come in till way later. Everything, all that got paid off with cattle alone, and A.J. Lindsay called me and said we were going to contest that $200 being too high to lower it. And A.J. Lindsay called me from San Antonio, and he says, I just heard that Bass has bought that Lips Ranch for $35 million, and it's just across the fence from us.
Uh-oh.
That's $800 an acre.
Right.
So... And AJ told me, he said, I know what y'all are doing, but you need to know this.
It could backfire.
So we jumped on that $200 a day.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That was wise.
Yeah. But that estate taxes and labor, and they don't address it. I don't know what the hell all that other shit they talk about, virtual fencing and all that other stuff, it ain't going to help nobody.
No. Research grants.
Yeah.
Well, you're a blessed man. You got a beautiful ranch here.
Well, thank you.
Great family, and met your grandsons today, and they seem like fine young men.
Well, there's still two more. The middle one's the one that Jake's the one that ropes, but he could ride a cutting horse if he can ride a cutting horse. He just rather rope than cut.
Sure.
And cutting's a rich man's game anyway.
That's a fact.
And then the little one, we still don't know what he's going to want to do.
Yeah.
And I guess Quentin, he's going to go to school.
Yeah. Well, good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, how old are you now? If you don't mind me asking.
82.
Oh, you got a long ways to go. As healthy as you are.
Yeah.
You are. You're spry. You're really in good health.
Well, I think I'm fortunate to be in good health.
Well, you've stayed active, kept yourself moving, and that goes a long way. It really does. Over the last couple of weeks, I've interviewed a 95-year-old and a 90-year-old and an 88-year-old, and it's interesting to see how things progress. The 95-year-old I was with the other day, her mind's just as sharp as can be.
The changes that they've seen.
That's right. But you're still living a great life here and spending time with your family and cattle and horses like you always have. So you're a lucky man.
I enjoy working cattle.
Mm-hmm. I can see that.
Yeah. Y'all probably had enough of me.
Oh no, I could sit here for days. I just enjoy history so much and knowing what goes on. And I was born and raised around South Texas and ranching down here, so all this is real important to me. And that's why I really appreciate your taking the time to do this today and kind of keep the stories alive. And that's what my goal is, to keep stories alive.
Yeah, I know one particular story about my dad when he didn't tell it to me, but a lot of late night rides in the car. I'd be in the back seat. He'd be talking to whoever was with him in the car. Mm-hmm. And when he lived over there at Spotty County, he liked to hunt cats with dogs when he was young. Mm-hmm. And he had this horse that he'd come to a fence. He'd lay his chaps up on the top wire, and the horse would jump over the fence. Yeah, and somebody stole 30 horses from him down there in Spotty County. And he trailed them. The river just 30 miles from there, from where the Jennings Ranch. Mm-hmm. And he trailed them. And he went across the river, found them, and brought them back.
You're kidding me.
Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. I mean, that's just kind of the kind of guy he was.
Yeah. Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Lucky you made it back at all, but he came back with his horses.
Yeah, he went over there and brought them back.
That's a bad hombre right there.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't have done that.
No, nor I.
But things were different. I guess,
no, that's right. Things change, and they'll continue to change.
Yeah.
So, well, I appreciate your having us here today, and a great lunch, and meeting your grandsons. It's been a good time for me. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.